Yo, what's good with y'all? So in today's video, I'm just gonna go ahead and clarify this right off the bat. This is not a new part of how to make still Brainrot. What this is simply a code review. If you don't know what that is, that's just simply me going through the code that I've written for the series, and like just for the game in general, the stuff that we made and everything, and just going through it and just explaining it. This is simply for people who just want to understand, who are interested in understanding the code at like a deeper level and just understanding why I wrote this specifically. I mean, I obviously explain it in the video, but this is just more in depth. I actually have time, since people are the only people who be watching this will be people who are interested in like actually learning and understanding rather than just making, right? So let's go ahead and get straight into it. Okay, so if we open up the server script, starting at the top, we have our variables, right? Our global variables stuff, right? So we have a lot of different things here. We have services, we have data stores, and then we have a variety of objects ranging from scripts to folders to a remote event. Okay, so for our services, right, we have the physics service. The physics service is for this specifically. This is for managing collisions. This is so that players can't collide with NPCs and vice versa. Then we have the pathfinding service. This is pathfinding is simply like it's essentially calculating a path, like literally as the name implies, pathfinding. It's how to calculate a path for an NPC to follow or walk, I guess you could say, and that's for the NPCs to walk across the threshold, what do we call this? The stage, the carpet, I guess. Yeah. Um. So yeah, they walk across that, right? Yeah. So moving on from there, we have the data store service. This is simply, to retrieve our data stores. Then we have the marketplace. This is for things like products, game passes, when you're charging players Robux for certain things. The messaging service, this is how you will establish cross communication between different servers by using the messaging service to send messages to various servers and whatnot. That's how we do it with the command, where you can you can send messages, you can announce messages globally to all servers. Then we have our data stores, so stats data stores. If I recall correctly, stats is like just the stuff on the leaderboard, which is like your money, your rebirth. Um, I think that's really just it, like your money and your rebirth. Then we have the own units data store, so this keeps track of all the units. So this keeps track of the units you currently, I probably should have named this like current own units to like help, but this pretty much keeps track of all the units that you currently own, like that you have, in your base. All own units, however, is like you own them at some point, even if you don't have them now. You may have that now, or you may not have that now. This is you need to differentiate between the two, specifically for own units, because it's like when the player leaves and rejoins the game, you want their base to repopulate with the NPCs that they had before, before they left. And then you need all own units data store because you know how there's a what's that thing called? Yeah, the index and stuff when the player goes to look to see like, oh, I have this NPC or I have that NPC and stuff. You need to be able to check to be like, okay, the player owns this NPC at one point in time, even if they don't have it. Then we have our core event, which is just a remote event. It's how we use to communicate between the client, whether it be the server sending a message to the client or the client sending a message to the server. Then we have our NPC folder, which just keeps track of what should I call it? Keeps track of our NPCs. Rebirth folder, which keeps track of the requirements as well as the rewards associated with rebirthing. Then we have our item folder, which is just items that the players can get, like just different tools and stuff that the players get. I think that's in server source. Yeah. So right now we just have the speed coil, and then we have the core module, which is our module script where we just have a variety of different functions, right? Moving on, this is where we get into the collision stuff, right? By using a protected call, we're registering the collision groups. Essentially, registering just means you're creating the collision groups. So we have players and NPCs. By set collidable and setting the false, we're saying, okay, so players and NPCs cannot collide. False means no, like as in, like you don't want to collide. If you said it's a true, then it means they will collide. So we're saying players and NPCs cannot collide. Then right here, we're saying NPCs along with other NPCs cannot collide. So an NPC cannot collide with another NPC, nor can a player collide with an NPC or an NPC collide with the player, right? Then we have this pretty, yep, pretty huge for loop, as you can see. So this is essentially setting up all of the functionality, I guess you could say, for the bases and stuff, right? For all of our different bases. So we're going to iterate through the workspace. Iterate just means go through something, right? Like essentially go through like a list, I guess you could say, right? Like if you were essentially a for loop is literally like you're searching for like, or at least let me phrase it. This kind of for loop is like we're using this to search a list. If you're looking for like, a name out of a list of people or something like things of that nature, right? So workspace get children. We're getting all of the children of workspace. Then we're gonna say if v, right, and v is just the objects inside of the workspace, right? Find first child owner. So if we find the owner value, that's how we know it's a base. Cool. Then we can create that variable. Then base.lock base.touch. So this is pretty much whenever a player wants to lock their base, right? Whenever they touch it, we need to first make sure that, of course, that the player is, the owner of said base, and we need to also make sure that the base isn't already locked and stuff, because then we would just be locking. Then a player could just continually, keep like locking in, and it would just kind of run on forever, right? Then so we're gonna update the is locked value, get the player, create our duration. If the player has a second floor and stuff, if the rebirth is equal to one, then that means they have second floor, right? Or sorry, not, sorry, I said that wrong. I said that wrong. If the player's rebirth is equal to 1, then we're going to increase the duration to 70 seconds. Their base can remain locked for a long period of time. If the player's rebirth value is at 1 or greater, then that means they have the second floor unlocked. If they have the second floor unlocked, that means we need to also lock the second floor and not just the first floor. Then we're going to fire all clients. So this is simply we're going to trigger the lock base functionality. I was just going to go through the server script, but I guess I'll just like kind of go through to just like walk you through like how everything is happening. So if I open up the local script, right, we're going to fire to all clients. This is the name of the event. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right here to my remote event code right here, the on client event. So we have our first event lock base. So we have the event type lock base. So this is the name of the event. Then we have the specific base that's getting locked, the duration, as you can see, and then whether or not the player has a second floor. So this is either true or false, right? Then what we're going to say is if base.owner.value. So if pretty much if the base is being locked is not the specific players, then we're going to make it so that this player can't enter the base because it's not their base, right? If it is their base, then we're not going to lock the base for them because they should be able to, have access to it and stuff. And then if it is the player's base, then we're going to notify them you have locked your base. And then we're gonna do all the stuff, make the lasers visible. If they have second floor, make the second floor lasers visible and stuff, and then just begin to lock the base, and as well as displaying it on the UI. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Then just after the time is up, then we'll notify the player that their base has been unlocked, and then we'll just make everything unlocked pretty much, right? And then, yeah, so moving on from there, you then have this for loop. This is for the platforms, right? So platform.collector.touched. First, again, we need to verify that whoever's touching that platform, or sorry, whoever's touching the collector is the owner of said base, as well as making sure that that there is a unit as an NPC on that platform and stuff generating that player money. If there is, we'll get the player and the specific NPC. We will retrieve the money and add it onto the player's current cash value, and then reset the NPC's money value and stuff, right? So that they can start generating more money for the player. Then we go down here, and then the second floor, literally what this does is does the exact same thing. It's just the only difference is this is for the first floor, this is for the second floor, but they do the same thing. And then that concludes the first, major for loop. Then we have this function, as the name implies, this loads the player's data. So all we need is the player, the specific player's data we're loading, as well as their base. So key is in other words a unique identifier for that data, right? It's tied to that data. It's like how you have a student ID, you have a driver license number, everyone has a social security number, things of that nature, right? So we're going to use the player's user ID because user IDs, Roblox players' user ID are unique. No two players can have the same user ID, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to retrieve the player's stats data, their own units data, their own units data, and then we're going to return all of that stuff, right? So if not success, then we're just going to return false. That means, we're not able to retrieve, we're not able to or load the player's data. Or I guess actually, yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Then we're going to, well, let's say we found their data. We're then going to say result one, because keep in mind, result is essentially kind of like a table and stuff of all of these results. So the first thing is going to be the stats. The second thing is going to be own units data. And the third thing is the all on units data, right? So then we're going to clear out the children, right? Because keep in mind, let's say in your game, players start out with own units by default and stuff, right? We want to make sure that's clear just in case. because we don't want them to have duplicates. And then if stats data, so if the data already, so then if if they have data, then we're going to go through and update it. So we're going to update. Oh, I actually forgot there is this other stuff. Last time online and multiplier. But yeah, so this stuff. So we're going to update the player steals, their rebirths, their cash, last time online, multiplayer. But these three are the only ones that are actually shown to other players. These two are simply just used. This is, used obviously in calculating how much money the NPC should be generating the player, and then last time online is to calculate how much offline cash that player earned, right? Then we have if all on units data, and this is just for the all on units, so all forever, like all time on units. We're simply just going to get the unit info, right? Which again is just a table. It's literally just a table within another table, because this is a table, then this is just a table. And then we're just retrieving, these two are just retrieving information from the table. The name of the unit, the rarity, and then we're just going to create that unit value, which is sort of string value. We're going to parent it to the all owned units folder. It's going to keep track of all of that, right? And then we have the own units data. So this is for the units you currently have. The reason why this has substantially more code is because you got to set up a whole bunch of stuff. You have to spawn in the NPC, assign it to the correct platform, update the UI and everything, and generate its offline cache. So that's why we have this specific platform, its name, the money, the saved if it has a mutation, and then right. So we're going to create the unit's value, and then we're going to assign it, and then we're going to assign it to a specific platform. Then here we just simply calculate how much cash, how much offline cash the player earned by literally we're just taking a snapshot of the current time, subtracting that from the last time the player was online, and then that's what we use to essentially we just use this basic formula, right? Money per second times time elapsed times multiplayer, and then boom, right? And then we'll just offline cash, and then we just add it, right? Now we have our NPC, and then we're just gonna do some formatting and stuff. The price above its head, we're gonna set all of the UI, its price, the name of the NPC, its rarity, and how much money it generates per second. And then this is just mutation stuff. Assuming the NPC has a mutation, you're just going to create that value. Depending on what the mutation is, will cause different effects. You'll update the mutation value as accordingly. Also update it in its rarity text label. You'll apply the necessary change. Maybe it'll be, changing the color of the NPC so that it's like golden or something. And then, yeah, stuff like that. So it's applying the effects. Then after that, you'll update some stuff for the sign platform. You'll make sure the collector is ready. So you'll set the NPC's position so that it's, on top of its platform and everything. Just setting all that up so the owner can sell it and other players can steal it. And then you're creating these, and then you're setting up these functions to generate money. So the NPC will begin generating money, and then the NPC prompt so that it can be stolen, sold, and right, and all those things. And then setting its collision group so that players can't whatchamacallit cannot collide with it, and the other NPCs cannot collide with it. And then this is simply to help with performance because there was an issue with performance I was having for like the first 8 parts of the series, and then just of course making sure it's anchored, and then just updating the player's money, which that's just updating the UI and stuff that displays at the bottom left here, right? And then yeah, so that covers that. How long has this been? It's been oh, okay, 13 minutes. Okay, um, I guess I'll go through. Damn, that's long. Okay. I'll go through one more function and then we'll wrap it up there. And then like if this video does well, then I'll just continue going through explaining the code for people who are interested to learn. Anyway, so then move on to this function. So this is, player to added function. So whenever the player joins the game, PLR will just for the player who joined the game. We're going to create a variable. This is going to be the player's base. We're just literally going to go through the workspace, find an object that has the owner value, which is how we know it's a base, and then make sure its value is set to none because that means it is a unowned base. So then we'll set it to okay, this is now the player's base. We're gonna update its name, and we're gonna put their sign, or we're gonna update the sign's text so that it says okay, this is such and such base. Then we're gonna go ahead and create all the players' values. So the leader stats folder, which is gonna display everything in the top right on like the leaderboard. So then we have our steals, our rebirths, our cash, and then our other folders, own units, cooldown folder. That's for like items like the bat and everything. Then your status for what you're doing, like if you're stealing, if you're idling, whatever the case. Then you have all own units, last time online, multiplayer, and then the friend boost for whenever friends are in the server, right? Then right here, this code is for whenever a player respawns. When they respawn, we're going to move them over to their base, their specific base, right? And then from there. We're going to update the collision group to make sure it's set to players, give them a hitbox so they can do combat or get hit with the bat, whatever the case, and then make sure it's welded to the player. And then this is where we'll load the data, we'll load the player's data and everything. Then this is for admin commands and stuff if players trying to use admin commands, right? Make sure making sure that it's more than one message and stuff, and that you find this. This is our prefix for commands and stuff, so we know that a player is trying to execute a command. Then you'll automatically lock the player's base for them and whatnot. If they have a second floor, you'll also make sure the second floor is locked. And then you'll just, trigger the lock base code and then apply the friend boost as accordingly. I set this to 1.1 and then back to 1 because it was like it was like a little delay, so I kind of had to like do it like this to make it work. Then right here we just again, if there's the more players, the greater the boost, right? And that concludes that. So we're at line 300. We're at like the halfway point for the code. So yeah, if this video does well, I will go ahead and cover the rest of the code. We'll finish the server script, the local script, the module and stuff. Then yeah, let me know if you guys enjoy videos like these and want more and stuff like that. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, definitely leave a like, subscribe. As you know, if you want access to these scripts or models or any of my other scripts and models, just simply read the description and find out how to gain access to that. Link is in the description. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you all for watching.